Angels with Dirty Faces came out in 1938, was nominated for a bunch of Academy Awards, stars James Cagney, is directed by Michael Curtiz. It is one of the greatest gangster films old Hollywood ever made, and we are covering it today on the Golden Hour Film Podcast. Hello everybody, welcome back to the Golden Hour Film Podcast. My name is Harry Bailey. I am joined by my co-host, not guest host, Shane Mulvaney. Shane, probably a different answer to usual from you today. How are you today?
Yeah, a little bit under the weather today, but troop on for the viewers and for the listeners. So yeah, I'll live. We'll get this podcast out for everyone.
Yeah, Shane is soldiering on this week, so make sure to thank him for doing that, because otherwise it would have been like the lifeboat episode, which was just me talking into a void, which I don't think anyone ever wants to see again. I think that episode ended up being like 20-something minutes as well. It was just horrendous. Anyway, Angels with Dirty Faces is one of the few from this month that I had seen prior. It stars James Cagney and Pat O'Brien, and is maybe a plot that you've heard of before, where two young hoodlums do a crime, one gets caught, one doesn't. The one who gets caught spends life in prison until eventually he gets out and gets into a life of crime, whereas the one who escaped turns to faith and becomes a priest. You may have heard of that before. Well, it's Angels with Dirty Faces. It is a fantastic film. We'll get into our spoiler-free reviews in just a minute, but a few things to note. As I said, nominated for a bunch of Academy Awards. James Cagney for Best Actor, Michael Curtiz for Best Director, and then an award that doesn't exist anymore that was Best Story. So there used to be Best Screenplay, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Story. And then in the 50s, I think 56 or 58, they got rid of Best Story, which, yeah, fair enough. But it didn't win any Academy Awards. It received pretty great reviews, was a bit of a box office success. It's another Warner Bros. Film. All 5 of our gangster films this month were, of course, Warner Bros. They were the goats at putting out or finding these gangster films. Initially, it wasn't a Warner Bros. Film, but the studio that had it went bankrupt, and James Cagney took the script with him to Warner Bros. And told them to buy the rights to it because he thought it was good. And boy, was he right. It's also got the Dead End Kids, which prior to this I hadn't heard of, but they were a bit of a big deal. Like, they were a bunch of New York, initially stage actors who were in a play called Dead End, or yeah, I think it's called Dead End, and that went for like 2 years, and then they ended up doing like 89 movies together across like 20 years. They went through different name changes and stuff, but they are basically like a collection of, at this point, very young New York actors who have kind of like Three Stooges kind of humor. But it's kind of funnier when they're like kids, because it's like it's a bunch of teenagers who are like smoking and drinking and gambling and assaulting people for the fun of it, which apparently they were doing backstage as well until the notoriously streetwise James Cagney just decked one, and then they behaved themselves for the rest of the shoot. But yeah, apparently they like stole Humphrey Bogart's trousers and everything. Like, they were just absolute menaces until James Cagney just, and then they were in line then for the rest of the shoot. But yeah, Shane, you had seen this before, hadn't you?
I had, yeah.
And what were you looking forward to it? What were your thoughts coming into it prior to this rewatch?
No, I absolutely loved it the first time I watched it. So really just wanted to try and see if I kind of held up, which I kind of felt that I would, and spoiler alert, it definitely did. We are covering a movie next week, The Roaring Twenties, which is also a movie starring James Cagney and Humphrey Bogart. Obviously this was the first of those movies, and they do have a lot of DNA that they share.
Yeah.
But yeah, this, I think, the fact that you, like you said, this has the kind of good versus bad, faith versus kind of evil kind of elements. It also has like obviously a lot of differences as well. It's kind of like that Robert Frost poem, The Road Not Taken.
Yes.
That's yeah, I love that poem. And it's like that always comes to mind every time I see a film like this, where it's like they essentially came from the same neck of the woods, and they're kind of living. They're each living a life that the other one could have had if things had just worked out slightly differently. And I think they really sell that kind of conundrum and that kind of slightly bittersweet element, because obviously James Cagney could easily have gone into a, because he's so good at playing like gangsters with hearts of gold, and yeah, I think you can kind of see that in this film. Like he's not necessarily an evil guy. He fell into a bad situation and he's embraced it more so than kind of it's sort of from like he has embraced it, but also he's not necessarily a bad evil person either. This is just what he does for a living kind of thing. But he clearly has a really good side to him as well. You look at how he treats the Dead End Boys, and he doesn't want them to go into the same kind of situation, same route as he goes down. So yeah, I was looking forward to seeing if it lived up to my expectation or to my memory, and it certainly did.
Yeah, you talk about The Road Not Taken, and I know with Cagney, he based his character, Rocky Sullivan, on a few different people in his life growing up, one of whom was one of his childhood best friends who ended up murdering someone and was killed on the electric chair one night when Cagney was performing on stage, which I think he said in his autobiography, like he never forgot that night, like coming off stage to find out that one of his childhood friends had gone down, the other road. And he also based it off I think a pimp who lived in his neighborhood as well, who used to say to everyone, what is it he keeps saying? What do you hear, what do you see, or something?
What do you hear, what do you see, or what do you mean, what do you say, or something?
Something. What do you mean, what do you say? Something like that. I'll get the exact phrase up now, but he got that phrase from a pimp who used to live in his neighborhood, who used to say that all the time. And he, again, in his autobiography, I haven't read it, but I've read snippets. It wasn't a complaint or anything, but he just said that it was funny that a lot of people, when they were doing their James Cagney impression for years to come, were unknowingly doing an impression of a pimp that lived in his neighborhood, because they kept saying, what do you hear, what do you say? That's what it is, yeah. But yeah, James Cagney obviously came from the background he came from, but then went the road down that he went down. But for me, this is like top 2 Cagney performances I've ever seen. I've seen a handful of James Cagney films, probably not quite 10, but like I've seen a handful of James Cagney films. This is, again, probably top 2 favorites, and then top 2 favorite Cagney performances. I think he's fantastic in this, and I reckon we get into our spoiler-free review. So Shane, what are your thoughts on the owl Angels with Dirty Faces? A name which always reminds me of the fictional movie that they always reference in the Home Alone movies.
Yeah, that's based on the fictional movie.
Always springs to mind.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you're into your kind of early period gangster movies, or just gangster movies in general, really, this will absolutely be up your street. I think James Cagney is brilliant. I think Pat O'Brien is really good. I think Humphrey Bogart, before he was like Humphrey Bogart, he was still like a really respected character actor and supporting actor. He's really good. And also, so like it works on the kind of moral quandary element, because obviously the priest wants his old friend to kind of renounce his old ways and go straight, essentially, and he obviously doesn't want to do that. But it also has a heck of an ending as well, which we'll come on to. Very ambiguous as well. The first, interesting is, I'm sure we'll come on to it, but the first time I watched it, I thought the ending clearly meant one thing. It didn't even cross my mind that it meant something else.
Yeah.
But when I watched it this time, automatically the ending completely changed for me. I actually thought it was a different thing then entirely. So yeah, we'll come on to that and what it actually means and stuff. But yeah, heck of an ending, and just a really, really great gangster film. So very, very much recommend this.
Yeah, I love this film, and just on that, this film is like proof for directors who insist on not explaining things.
Yeah.
I love that we don't know what the real motivations behind the characters in the ending are. I think it's excellent. It makes the movie infinitely more rewatchable and infinitely more impactful.
Yeah.
Again, that is a spoiler, so we'll talk about that in our spoiler-filled section of the podcast. But yeah, overall, I love this film. One of my absolute favorite films from the 30s, which, as you all know, is a decade I love. It is definitely my favorite gangster film we've covered this month.
Same.
It is probably my favorite gangster film we've covered on the podcast. I think it's fantastic. It's just packed with memorable characters. I love as well that there's just a random basketball match halfway through this movie. It's like 10 minutes. It's just a random, like, why can't we get more of that? Why can't we get more just random basketball matches inserted into the middle of movies? I feel like every movie would benefit with a random basketball match between its characters. But yeah, overall, really love this movie. James Cagney is fantastic. Pat O'Brien is fantastic. Humphrey Bogart, as you said, like, proper respected supporting character actor at this point. He wasn't the main man in Hollywood yet. I think next week when we talk about Roaring Twenties, I think that's when he really started to turn heads. I think his character next week we'll talk about next week, but I think this one is still a fantastic shady side character who is essential to this film. I really like him in it, but it's probably not. It's not like the best of those shady side characters Bogey played. It is still a fantastic one. And yeah, shout out Pat O'Brien, an actor who I have probably seen in a couple of films, but never paid an awful lot of attention to him. But I'll never forget his role in this film as the priest, because yeah, Father Jerry, which is my local priest's name as well, which is why I remember it. But yeah, he is fantastic in this. I enjoy the Dead End Kids as well. I was kind of worried that going way back to when we covered Stalag 17, I remember Shane saying that there was two slapstick characters in that film who on a rewatch the jokes didn't land as well. And I was kind of worried that on this rewatch of Angels with Dirty Faces that the slapstick characters, the Dead End Kids, the humor wouldn't land. I don't know, something about a bunch of 16, 17-year-old looking kids smoking and punching each other. It's just funny. It's just funny. And shout out Anne Sheridan as well. She plays Laurie, the love interest for Rocky Sullivan in this. She's very good as well. Overall, I would absolutely recommend this film. We're going to get into some more spoilery content now, but just know that I would wholeheartedly recommend Angels with Dirty Faces to all of you. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, like this video, comment on this video, subscribe if you're new. If you're listening, share it with your friends, comment if you want. I check maybe every 6 months on Spotify to see if anyone's commented, because it's actually really difficult. You don't get notifications when people comment on your Spotify. So it's a bit of a nightmare trying to figure out if people do or don't comment. And follow us on Instagram as well, because that's where all of our most up-to-date updates come from. And now it is time for the main event. Shane, Angels with Dirty Faces, with as many spoilers as you'd like. What's it all about?
So, like you said, it follows two guys, Rocky Sullivan, played by James Cagney, and Jerry, who's played by Pat O'Brien. But this is them as youngsters, so they're best friends, childhood best friends, and they're kind of local. They get into trouble, but they're not necessarily like evil kids or anything. They're not up to that much. They're
a bit like the Dead End Kids.
Yeah.
Like they're like if anything, they're even more tame than the Dead End Kids. They loiter.
Yeah.
They wouldn't go around robbing banks.
So they see this train one day, and they're looking like they're gonna steal stuff off the train. But when the police are there and security, and the two of them leg it, Jerry manages to get away, and Rocky doesn't. Now Rocky tells Jerry to go get away, like, you save yourself kind of thing. No point in both of us getting caught. So anyway, Rocky goes to juvenile detention. He's there for a few years. He's in and out of juvenile detention. And then we catch up with him when he's kind of in young adulthood, and he's obviously done a couple of prison stretches as well by this time, because he has pulled a job with a guy called Fraser, played by Humphrey Bogart, and there's essentially $100,000 that he is expecting to come to him. Fraser says, "I can't get that money to you not until you get out," but he says, "All right, I'll do the stretch for both of us, but I expect that money to be there when I come out." So that's kind of the deal they strike. And in the meantime, Jerry has become Father Jerry. He's got into the priesthood, and he's kind of got on the straight and narrow, and he's not necessarily, obviously, doing some shady stuff anymore. So eventually the day comes, Rocky gets out of prison and he's looking for lodgings, and then he goes to the kind of place where Jerry is, and they reconcile, they meet up, and obviously rekindle their friendship. And yeah, it looks like he's obviously trying to but he's trying to push Rocky into going straight on the straight and narrow like he did. But obviously we know at this stage, and obviously Rocky knows, that he still has that $100,000 that's still owed to him, so he's going to go to Fraser and make sure that he gets that money back.
Yeah, as well, shout out to whoever cast young James Cagney in this.
Yeah, he looks exactly like him.
So accurate. Yeah. Incredible casting. And yeah, he ends up getting a room organised by Father Jerry, who he's got like an apartment block that has a lot of the kids who he looks after living in it as well. And a girl, Laurie, who they used to pick on when they were kids, actually helps run it. So she shows him to his room and then like smacks him and is like, that's revenge for like 20 years ago or something. And it's quite a funny scene as well, because he tries to sit on the bed and the bed just implodes. So yeah, he may be waiting on that 100K, but he's in a pretty small room until he gets that 100K. Let's just say he moves in, and instantly then he goes to meet Fraser, played by Bogey, who's his accountant. And Fraser is not one bit pleased when he comes to collect the 100K. It's very apparent early on. Fraser had no intention of giving him this money. Probably didn't expect him to get out as soon as he did. Doesn't want him to have anything to do with anything, and even tells him that we don't have a job for you in the gang. Like, I don't know, was it a bit of a miscommunication? And Mac Kiefer, who's kind of like the head honcho, who is the employer of Fraser, the main gangster, does say to Rocky, look, obviously a bit of a miscommunication here. I can get you into the gang. Just leave it with me. We'll pull a few strings. But then whenever Rocky leaves, Fraser sends a guy to tail him. So, yeah, unbeknownst to Rocky, Fraser from the get-go in this film wants to get rid of him because there's a guy on his tail. Instantly, we meet the Dead End Kids, who I'm not going to bother naming them. They're effectively a collective anyway. That, like, you get maybe one or two individual scenes for the Dead End Kids. I think one called Soapy has a few scenes by himself. But as a whole, they are just a collective. They mug Rocky on his way out after Mac gives him a wad of cash to look after himself. But Rocky goes after them and finds them because their hideout is his and Jerry's old hideout. So he pretends to do a stick up, gets the money back, tells them that he's Rocky Sullivan, and all of a sudden they have a new father figure or a new deity to worship, because Rocky Sullivan is a fairly notorious gangster for the youths in this place. And as I said, these kids, the Dead End Kids amongst others, are all also trying to be pushed onto the straight and narrow by Father Jerry, who has like a rec center where they play basketball and, you know, do after school study or whatever. But now that Rocky has come in, although he has every intention of rekindling his friendship with Jerry, what he doesn't realize from the get-go is that he is already corrupting these people just by being there. And you get this whole dynamic then for the rest of the film where Jerry's trying to turn Rocky onto the straight and narrow. Rocky's trying to like still be a gangster while still maintaining his friendship with Jerry. And these kids are just only listening to Rocky rather than the Father Jerry, which... yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic because Father Jerry almost wishes that the kids looked up to him in the same way they look up to Rocky, but he wants to do it in as clean a way as possible.
Yeah, very much so. And then Rocky is walking one day with who's the name of the girl, like
Laurie.
Laurie, yes. So he's walking down the street with her, and pretty cool.
Just prior to that, we get the 10-minute basketball match as well.
Yeah, and the kids are absolutely shy as well. That's what's funny about it.
Yeah, because they're all smokers.
Yeah, so, but yeah, he's walking down the street and he thinks he spots someone following him. So what he does is he asks her a question and he looks in the mirror and he can spot one of Fraser's goons following him. He's like, don't worry, I've got everything I need. So he goes into like this kind of a grocery store kind of place. Manages to hide off in a phone booth, and then they think they have him cornered. So what he does is he kind of flips the tables and essentially sets this other guy out to be ambushed. And so Fraser's goons, of course, come in, assassinate this guy who they think is Rocky, and he obviously gets away. And then he manages to kidnap Fraser after some other shenanigans, and walk in, and this guy called, like you said, Mac Kiefer, is that his name?
Yeah,
Matt Kiefer. So yeah, he's look, I've kind of rumbled your operation. Gets them to give him the 100k that he's owed, and then he also takes some leverage from the safe, proving that Fraser's dodgy dealings. So says, look, try any of that stuff again, and I'm gonna put this in the hands where it can really hurt you. So eventually they kind of come to a very loose compromise and a very loose kind of agreement, but I think both parties know it's not really going to stick, where it looks like they're going to work together, but I think that's very much a ticking clock on that particular relationship, because I think both parties know what's going to happen.
Yeah, so whilst that whole dynamic's going on, this is all unbeknownst to Jerry. Yeah, he's got Fraser kidnapped until he gets his 100k. He's quite hubris as well, because instead of getting the gangsters after him, Mac sends dirty cops after him to try and arrest him and pin him for something. But then whenever they arrest him and ask him for his lawyer is also Fraser, so he calls Fraser, which then just completely confuses the cops and they don't know what to do with him anymore. And Fraser is now free and gets to Mac and tells him to call the cops off of Rocky, because he can blackmail them with everything he stole that he could pin on them. So, as I said, he's quite hubris, because he takes the money and then wants back in on the gang and tries to like juggle a relationship with Mac and Fraser. Yeah. Not to get too far ahead, but things don't go well for him because of his hubris. He's still got these kids absolutely idolizing him as well. He teaches them a few things, and he gets them to stash the 100k in the den as well, so that they can't find it. And he all gives them a little bit of cash for saying nothing. So as I said, like, Jerry is desperate for these kids to look up to him, and he comes looking for them one day, and they're nowhere to be seen because they're all down at the pool hall. They've all bought suits and they've spent all their money on alcohol and cigars, and Jerry is not one bit pleased. He says this to Rocky. Rocky doesn't really understand, so Jerry comes down and asks him, are they going to come down to play the return leg of the basketball match? And they get all shy and coy about it, because they obviously know that what they're doing is wrong because they've let him down, but none of them actually come out with him. So Jerry just leaves them. He kind of storms off. And meanwhile, Laurie and Rocky's whole relationship is developing. Laurie's ex-husband was a guy on the straight and narrow who turned to crime when he got broke and then was shot as a result of it. So, you know, the attempted shootings at Rocky definitely have her not willing to 100% commit to him. But he does very much pursue her. And this whole James Cagney thing of like, this character is making all these fuck ups, but you can tell around the right characters, the father Jerry's, the dead end kids, the Lauries, he does have just the best intentions. He's not trying to mess any of them over. It's just, if anything, the only person he's messing over is himself. He's quite a self-destructive character. But yeah, I just think Cagney plays it so well.
Yeah, totally. And at this point, Connolly is kind of, like you said, pleading with Rocky to, if he's not going to go on a straight and narrow himself, at least stop trying to be or at least stop being like a a hero figure to these kids, the dead end kids, because obviously they're starting to worship him, and then he starts to make these public kind of decrees against Rocky, where he's like really campaigning against obviously like organised crime and against Rocky personally. There's a grand jury set up against Rocky, so yeah, things have started to kind of go against Rocky from that point of view. And then we get to the scene where Matt Kiefer says the priest, meaning obviously Father Jerry, is going to be taken care of tonight. He's talking to Fraser, he's talking to Rocky, and Rocky sticks up for him. So even though he's obviously kind of the target of this kind of this diatribe from Father Jerry, he obviously still loves his old friend, and if he finds out that they're going to try and assassinate Father Jerry, and he sticks up for him, and Rocky overhears this whole conversation, and he kills Matt Kiefer, and then he kills Fraser after a big shootout and stuff at their HQ. And then obviously this sets off a whole commotion. Then the police get involved, and yeah, it's the beginning of the end for Rocky.
Yeah, there's a great line from Father Jerry whenever he refuses a bribe from. It's not even really a bribe, because you just don't know with the character of Rocky. Rocky anonymously donates 10 grand to the church. And you don't know if it's a bribe for him to shut up, or if it is just him giving the money to Father Jerry's church. But Father Jerry returns it and says that he doesn't want to build on rotten foundations. So it's a great line. But after the shootout, he's killed those two gangsters. The police are after him. So Rocky hides out in this big building. He gets into a big L shootout. And he ends up actually kind of taking Jerry hostage as well, when they send Jerry in to try and coax him out. Also, just a lovely, I know you referenced the bit where he looks in the mirror to see the guy behind him. See, I love all those little things, like the cops throwing a smoke bomb, so he takes a bin lid and throws it over it so that the smoke doesn't spread as fast. Just class. But like, you wouldn't know that. You wouldn't think of that, I'd say, on the spot, unless you were like in that life, you know. So I'd say, like, whoever wrote that in, fair play to you. That's a great bit of
detail,
like quick thinking for the character to be thinking. It's very accurate. I really appreciated it. But yeah, he holds Father Jerry at gunpoint to try and escape, and then legs it. He gets shot but doesn't die or anything. And then they reveal that, you know, his gun was actually empty. He would never actually shoot Jerry. Like, Jerry obviously does mean the world to him. But then we get the ending of all endings, genuinely, because of the ambiguity, one of the best endings we've probably covered on the podcast so far. It just makes this film so rewatchable. So basically, with the dead end kids at home, like, waiting to hear what happens to their hero Rocky, Father Jerry goes into death row, because ultimately he is going to be sent to the electric chair. He's, you know, committed murder, and you can tell, at least in this first interaction, that Rocky doesn't appear scared at all. He almost welcomes death, because he kind of sees himself as maybe a martyr or something, or, you know, he lived the life that he had to live, and this is just one of those things. So he says he's not scared, and Father Jerry begs him, when he gets to the electric chair, to go out yellow, go out like a coward, go out crying and whimpering, so that it doesn't set a good example for the kids, and the kids don't think that he's this cool guy and that crime doesn't pay. And he absolutely refuses, says no. All of this is shot really well as well. Shout out Michael Curtiz. Just a fantastic director. Can I just say, Shane, because you will probably remember this, I'd assume you were in class that day. So I remember some of the howler takes that some of our lecturers had in our undergrad. One of them, I remember, Des said that Vittorio De Sica was a one-hit wonder, and he's one of the greatest Italian directors in, like, Italian neorealism. But he called him a one-hit wonder, which at the time I didn't know was a insane claim to make. But I know now that horrendous take. But one of the worst takes, if not the worst take, and she was a good lecturer, and forgive me, I don't remember her name, but she taught us about, like, old Hollywood and producers and the studio system and everything.
Oh, that was
And do you remember that? I don't remember her name.
Veronica.
It was that class that had.
Veronica, was it?
I think it might have been Veronica, but she was trying to prove a point about how it was auteur theory and how, in some cases, the movie is bigger than the director. For instance, none of you can name the person who directed Casablanca. I was like, Michael Curtiz is one of the greatest directors of the 20th century,
Very much so.
of American cinema in the 20th century. But her whole point was, like, don't get me wrong, Casablanca is far more culturally relevant than the name Michael Curtiz. But like, to say that the guy who directed Robin Hood is like not culturally relevant is like, it was an insane, but like that was the whole PowerPoint, was like auteur theory. You know, you've got Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds because Alfred Hitchcock is the big name or whatever, versus this chump Michael Curtiz. And I just thought that is the worst take I've ever heard. But yeah, I want to champion Michael Curtiz because he has directed over 100 movies, some absolute bangers. There's probably plenty of films from old Hollywood that the people watching this, because, you know, we have established that a lot of our audience do just watch old Hollywood, like that is our audience. There's probably a bunch of films you don't even realize were directed by Michael Curtiz that you have seen. Like White Christmas we covered on the podcast. That's Michael Curtiz as well. Obviously this, Michael Curtiz. Like, I just want to shout the guy out. An incredible director of his time. I don't want to call him a safe pair of hands, but I feel like any studio could turn to him and be like, here, we have this really good script. We just want a good movie to match this script. And he is the guy. He's the guy that delivers that. But yeah, this whole ending is directed excellently. I loved it. It's shot well, it's acted well, it's written well, it's directed well, it's edited well. Because really gets you in the feels. Because as Cagney's character, all draped in his shadows at Dutch angles, is walking towards the electric chair, he looks absolutely ice cold. And then he goes behind the wall where you can just see through it, which again, excellent choice.
Veil, yeah.
And all of a sudden he just starts whimpering and crying out and saying he doesn't want to die, and he goes out yellow. And Pat O'Brien, Father Jerry, starts whimpering to himself, and the boys back home, the dead end kids, they find out that he went out yellow and he was screaming and crying, and Father Jerry reaffirms this, and that is how the film ends as well. Yeah, I just think, as you said, it first time watching, you think, oh yeah, he just put on an act.
Yeah, that's exactly
last minute. But second time watching it, you do think, what if he was just absolutely fucking terrified at the end?
I think he was, yeah. I mean, the fact that it's ambiguous enough that it could be either, very, very plausibly be either explanation, is such a great ending. Because the first time I was so convinced that it was just an act that he was performing.
Yeah.
But the second time around, I don't think he's the type of person that would do something like that. Just maybe he would, maybe he would do it for Father Jerry, for his old friend, but I still think he's such a principled guy that he wouldn't necessarily do it just unless it was legit, you know. It's such a memorable ending.
Yeah, absolutely phenomenal. I love this film. It is, as I said, my favorite film we've covered so far this month. One of my favorite films of the 30s. It'll go up there. It'll probably end up, God knows what films we're covering this year, but it'll end up in the sort of top, the top quarter of films that we've covered this year. I would say absolutely 100%. Like, this is a fantastic film. You should all go and see. I gave it 4.5 stars first time I watched it. I gave it 4.5 stars the second time I watched it. I absolutely love it. I love how dense this film is. I think one of my gripes with the likes of Little Caesar and The Public Enemy and The Doorway to Hell, I like those films, don't get me wrong, but I don't want to say that they feel one note, but you know on the surface exactly what the film's about and where it's going and what's happening. With Angels with Dirty Faces, you've so many different relationships that are explored. You've got the gangster and his best friend who went straight. You've got the gangster and the girl who he's trying to pick up. You've got the gangster and the people who look up to him. You've got the priest and the people who he wants to look up to him. Then you've got the whole underworld and all those things going on. And then you've got that incredible ending. And It's just so layered. It's so dense. Acting is amazing. Screenplay is fantastic. Just thoroughly enjoyed this film. Couldn't say enough good things about it. As I said, it's up there with White Heat for me as my favorite James Cagney film and my favorite James Cagney performance. It is, as far as I've seen so far, could you call him a protagonist in this?
I think he is. I think he carries
a,
the film from a narrative point of view. And
but are we following a protagonist? Or
like, he's not someone that you're supposed to look up to.
Like, the protagonist of the film, realistically, is Father Jerry. So, by that logic, are we still following the protagonist, or is it a Great Gatsby where we've what was that word that that phrase that English teachers used to love? Unreliable narrator. How many times was that drilled into us between the ages of 15 and 17? But yeah, we've a real shady, but it seems good-hearted lead performance here, lead character here. Whether he's a protagonist or not is up for you guys in the comments to decide. I'm sure one person's going to say he's absolutely obviously a protagonist, and one person will say, how could you possibly call him a protagonist? But yeah, I just love how layered the character is as well, because often these characters are unredeemable. Little Caesar, unredeemable, just scum of the earth. You've got, they're either unredeemable or they're almost too nice. Like they're like a gangster with a heart of gold. This is a cutthroat gangster who loves his friends.
Yeah.
I just think that it's so much more layered than any of the other gangster films we've covered this year in 2026. And yeah, I'm just gonna stop harping on. But yeah, fantastic. And shout out once again Michael Curtiz, who, again, I would say by the end of the year will have quietly built up a serious Golden Era film podcast resume. I'd say this is most definitely not the last Michael Curtiz film we will cover this year.
Yeah, I gave this 4 stars on both occasions. Very close to giving it 4.5. But yeah, either way, like, we're nitpicking here. It's a fantastic movie. Amazing Jimmy Cagney performance, amazing Humphrey Bogart performance, really good Pat O'Brien performance, and like you said, yeah, it's just a whole kind of moral dilemma and moral quandary of, you really want to help your friend stop going down this route and stop kind of messing up his whole life, but also you do have a responsibility to a community as a community leader to show people that this isn't someone who's worth kind of idolizing and worshipping and stuff, and so especially the youth. And so you can really, I think he does a really good job, Pat O'Brien, of kind of selling that. And then like, the ending is just we're going to keep talking about, but it's absolutely amazing. It's so ambiguous, but whichever way you kind of look at it, and like I said, I on each occasion I read something different, but either way the ending is so impactful. Like, I really felt really impacted by the ending, and it really worked for me, no matter which of the two kind of theories I think is actually what ends up happening. Just a brilliant gangster movie. I would definitely agree with you, it's the best we've seen so far this month.
Class. Shane, would you rather talk about the movies we've watched recently, or do a quick game of guess the movie to round this one off?
I think we'll do guess the movie next week, just because I'm kind of have a pounding headache, I'll be completely honest with everyone.
Yeah.
So
yeah, fair. You probably would be able to guess. Sweet. Well, I've watched a couple of movies, like literally I think 2, but I'm more than happy to talk about both. First and foremost, I watched a film that maybe the non-Irish listeners may not have heard of. I do gauge this with a guy in my college course from India as to whether or not this film is like on his radar or not, because he watches like all 2025 releases, or that year's releases, and he hadn't heard of Saipan, which stars Anna Hardwick and Steve Coogan. It is about one of the most tabloid moments in Irish history. It is about Roy Keane, probably the greatest footballer to ever play for our country, and the shenanigans that ensued at the build up to the 2002 World Cup between himself and Mick McCarthy. And it is just a really really did exceed my expectations. That sounds like a backhanded thing to say, but I didn't really know if you could get a full movie out of all of this. There's enough drama in the Roy Keane Mick McCarthy fallout for a Netflix documentary, absolutely, but then they do just pad everything anyway. I wasn't sure if they'd get like a full narrative out of it, and I really think they did.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a few things, there's a few little liberties they took with the truth, but overall, like poor Niall Quinn comes across like such a plonker.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, I think the biggest takeaway is undoubtedly that Éanna Hardwicke is a fantastic Roy Keane. He absolutely nails it. But then, as the reviews said, like why should we praise him? It's like praising the postman for delivering the post. That is a Roy Keane quote about when a footballer once celebrated a goal. Yeah, it is a good film. I was very happy with it. It's not the best movie I saw last year or anything, but like directed well. There's a few moments there where the director really had me. Some great music choices, opening with Acquiesce from Oasis. Fantastic choice.
Closing with Fontaines
Only
DC as well.
Well, my only gripe is that they went with Fontaines because everything else was of the time.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, everything else was of the time. The Fontaine song actually did take me out of it. Supposedly they did want a different song and they couldn't get the rights to it, so they went with Fontaine's last minute. But don't get me wrong, favorite Fontaine's, great song, great tune, but yeah, it just didn't really work for that scene for me because everything else was like of that era. Also, it's got one of the young offenders in it, which is just really funny to me. And the other film I watched is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. And yeah, like, had you asked me like 10 years ago when I was a teenager what my thoughts on the Harry Potter franchise were, I would have said that my favorite was definitely the last one, and I definitely don't think that anymore.
I don't really like the last one. Yeah.
I think the more I watch it, the more it annoys me. I still give it a really high rating, just because like it is a culmination of like everything, and definite rose tinted glasses on my own part. But I feel like every time I rewatch that film, my rating will go down more and more and more. Like I used to have it at a 5, and it is just progressively going down. Yeah, there's just some bonkers decisions in that film that, like, my biggest gripe is how little, like, Hagrid gets, I think, 3 lines of dialogue in the last Harry Potter film. That is a joke. That wound me up so much. I think he gets like 3 prominent scenes where he gets like a singular his like send off at the end of the film is nothing as well. It's just him saying bye and then walking out the doors of the castle whilst Harry then begins a conversation with someone else. Like and I get the people say like, yeah, he named his kid after 2 people who were dead, but like, come on. The disrespect is serious in that case then. Like, how serious not getting in there ahead of Dumbledore? Fuck off. Yeah, I know there's issues with the book there rather than the film, but like still, the film also just wound me up a lot. Shout out Neville though, just the absolute goat. What about you?
Me. So I went to a double screening last week of 28 Years Later, which obviously came out last year and which I had seen, which is again really, really good on the second viewing. And straight after that, well, I say straight after, it was about a 20-minute intermission, but then they showed 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, obviously the new release. Fantastic movie, really worthy sequel. I love what Nia DaCosta did because she's obviously an American woman, and the fact that it's such a British horror series, I was interested to see how she would kind of navigate and especially like, do you see 28 Years Later?
I've seen 28 Days Later. Right, so I am so behind on that franchise.
I apologize for spoiling the ending. I don't know if you've seen already of 28 Years Later, but there's a very, very infamous, shall we say, real life figure that is, I'll just say, so Jimmy Savile, there's a whole crew of people, there's a whole crew of like people that dress up as Jimmy Savile. Essentially, they're called the Jimmies. They show up at the end of 28 years later. Look, it's out there. It's not a spoiler for people, but anyway. And then there are much more prominent. They are the antagonists of this movie, especially Jack O'Connell, who plays the leader. What a year he's had, by the way, between Sinners and this. What two absolutely terrifying villains. He's amazing in this.
He's been underrated for too long, though.
Yeah, he's a brilliant actor. He's been a great actor for a long time. And Ray Fiennes, who's obviously in the last one as well, he's brilliant as this. Like, you think he's, when you initially see him in 28 years later, you think he's this psychopath, but he's really not. Like, he's so much humanity, so much decency in him. Even though he's like covered in like iodine and like he looks like he's just murdered about 50 people. And he's built this whole kingdom of skulls. Like, he looks like a psychopath, but he's really not. Again, his character gets fleshed out a lot in this brilliant film. Two fantastic performances, and goes to some places, especially towards the end, that I didn't see coming. So I really can't wait to see. Hopefully we get the follow-up. It was intended as a trilogy, these three movies, and we've seen the first two, obviously, so I really hope we do get the last film. The Rip is the latest movie starring Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. Obviously, they've made a bunch of great movies together. Really good. It does rip, pun intended, for the first couple of acts. But then I think it goes more formulaic and generic in the third act. It just becomes a standard action movie at that point, and less interesting as a result. But I do think the first couple of acts keep you on your toes, keep you guessing, and I really had a good time, so I'd recommend it. Boy A is from John Crowley, and it's starring Andrew Garfield, so it's really what a performance that he put in. It's obviously early in his career. I think he would have been probably in his early 20s at this point, but it's following a guy who's just out of prison, who was in prison for child murder. So he was a child, him and his another young boy at the time murdered a young girl. It's not based on a real story, it's a fictionalized, it's actually based on a novel. Obviously there are plenty of real life stories I'm sure that I was influenced by as well, but anyway, he gets out of prison and he has to take on a new identity, an alias, and because he doesn't, obviously it was such a high profile case that essentially he's in danger if they find out. Anyway, this guy is trying to kind of get back into ordinary life and trying to like build a new life for himself, and then certain things happen and transpire, and it's whether he can actually do that considering what he's actually done. And it doesn't offer any easy answers, because it's like he's done such a horrific thing that of course like people are going to be extremely upset if someone like that lives near them. But it's also does ask the question, like, does someone deserve a second chance? Are they capable of change and stuff? Doesn't offer any easy answers, but Andrew Garfield is fantastic. It's one of his best performances that I've seen him in, certainly. Fail Safe, I know you've seen this from Sidney Lumet.
Banger.
Yeah, it takes its time to get going, and that's very much deliberate, because once it gets going, it's a proper panic attack of a film. Like, you I was sick when I watched this, and obviously I'm still sick now, but I was sick when I watched this, and it did not make me feel any better. It just made me feel worse and worse than I already felt. It's such a panic attack, so anxiety inducing, and Henry Fonda is amazing as the president, who's put in this impossible predicament about what he should do, and like essentially there's no good options here. It's obviously an allegory for the nuclear age and for the Cold War, because it's obviously set in the 60s. And they mention like the hydrogen bombs, and they mention like obviously World War II and Nagasaki and Hiroshima and stuff. So like it's very much a direct response to what happened in that and the atrocities of those situations. Again, doesn't offer any easy solutions, and it's just a proper panic attack of a film. School of Rock, my favourite movie of all time. Just comfort viewing. Sick.
Valid.
Yeah, sick. So I wanted to throw it on, and it made me feel a bit better about myself.
Valid.
Yeah, and then About Time, which I'd only seen a little bit of before, so I didn't. This is my first time watching it start to finish. I enjoyed it, but it is that Richard Curtiz thing of it's very like it's a nice comfort watch, but again it's very I don't know, simplistic, and Yeah, like I don't think he really stretches himself. Like I think he could have gotten more off the actual premise of like time travel and what happens if you go back in time and change stuff. And I think there was more maybe tension and drama to mine off that kind of thing. But it's all, look, it is meant to be like a romantic comedy slash just a kind of a light-hearted romantic film. So maybe I'm just wanting it to be something that it was never going to be. It's a good movie though. I would recommend it. And yeah, that's what I watched.
Sweet. Next week is Raoul Walsh. Have we covered him on the podcast
I don't
yet?
believe so, no, but he's a really good director. I've seen a few of his stuff.
Yeah, I tell you what, I think this year we will we'll introduce directors into the podcast debut award. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that'd be good actually, because he's a good director. Right?
Yeah, last year, just because of how many people were debuting, but like I feel like we haven't checked off all the big ones, obviously. Like, for God's sake, James Cagney made his debut in 2026. But yeah, I think it'll be worth including directors in best podcast debut for this year, because it is the debut of Raoul Walsh, The Roaring Twenties, starring once again James Cagney and Humphrey Bogart. And yeah, I had never seen this film prior to us recording that episode, so yeah, very much looking forward to talking about that. But in the meantime, this was the episode of the Golden Hour Film Podcast where we covered Angels with Dirty Faces, a fantastic film from 1938 that you should all check out. And we will see you all next week. I've been Harry Bailey.
I've been Shane Maffani.
Goodbye.